Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you my 3 favorite paper aircrafts that I've known since I was a kid. They bring a lot of fun whether you're indoors or outdoors. In fact, I made paper airplanes back in school way more times than I can count. Let's get right into it with my favorite type of paper airplane. This design is extremely versatile with the ability to be anything from a stunt plane to one of the best glider planes out there. To get started, we'll need a piece of printer or lined paper. Let's first take a look at the way we fold the paper. I've found that I get the best results with the following method. Line up the edges of the paper as shown and put it down on a flat surface while holding the edges in place. Smooth down the paper, making sure the sides stay in line. Work your way from the outside to the inside where the fold is going to be. This method ensures that the edges are still lined up after the paper is creased and prevents complications down the line. Fold the paper to a little less than halfway down the page, as shown. Next, bring the top right corner over and line it up on the right side of the crease that we just made. Then fold the other side over the same way, bringing them together at the middle. Do your best to close the gap without overlapping the flaps or making them uneven. Now fold the top part of the paper over the flaps we just folded. The crease should be exactly at the end of the flaps, forming a nice point at the sides of the paper. Next, grab one of the top corners and bring it over to the line in the middle of the paper. It's helpful to use your fingers to smooth out the paper so that it can bend easily. Fold it down at about 1.5 inches above the bottom of this large triangle. Do the same thing for the other corner, making sure that they meet at the same point and are mostly congruent. Smooth out the folds and then bring this little triangle up, folding it over the 2 flaps we just made. Next, hold the triangle as you fold the paper in half, facing away from you. That initial crease we made is again helping us keep things centered during this step. Now let's make the wings. This part has the biggest impact on how your plane is going to fly. We want a diagonal fold, but not just any diagonal line will do. Too shallow and your plane won't fly, too steep and it constantly stalls and won't go very far. Try to make the fold at this angle shown. The nose of the plane should be around 1 centimeter tall and the fold should be as close to the top of this little triangle as possible. I found that the airplane has the best flight characteristics when the wings are folded in this way. After smoothing down the wing, flip it over and make the other wing by matching it with the first one. After that, just lift up the wings a bit and your plane is ready to fly. Let's go test it out. When it's made well, this airplane can fly a completely straight and steady line indoors with an excellent glide ratio. However, hard crashes will dent the nose of the plane and eventually change its flight characteristics. It'll still fly great though, just maybe not in a perfectly straight line. Let's go try it outside. Outdoor flying is a bit different than indoors. Planes that fly straight and steady indoors tend to not do as well outside due to wind. If you find your plane nosediving or not going very far, there's actually an easy way to fix that. All you have to do is make some flaps to give it a little extra lift. Tear or cut a small line on the wing, leaving at least 1 centimeter on each side. The bigger you make the flaps, the more of an impact they'll have on the plane's flight. When you've made the cuts, simply bend the flaps upward. In flight, they'll push the nose of the airplane up, giving it more lift. This trick can also be used to fix a plane that simply doesn't want to fly. By using different configurations for the paper flaps we made, we can correct a failing airplane or even have it do things like fly upside down. Alright, now that we've seen this airplane's awesomeness and know how to make it, let's move on to another fun flying paper craft that always amazed me when I was young. It's a simple paper helicopter commonly known as a whirlybird or a rotocopter. When dropped, it spins and slowly falls to the ground. In the right conditions, it can even fly upwards, which is always fun to watch. Sadly though, there wasn't enough of an updraft for that to happen when I filmed it. To get started, grab a piece of printer or lined paper. We'll need to cut the paper lengthwise to make it more narrow. Cutting the page in half is the easiest way to get a piece with the right ratio of length to width. Unlike the paper airplane we made, you don't really need to be meticulous in cutting the paper like I am. However, I have found that these perform the best when the length is between 2.5 and 3 times the width of the paper. The whirlybird will pretty much fly no matter what though, so just use some scissors and visually estimate the midpoint to make your cut. Once you've reduced the sheet to a half page, make a cut in the middle of that piece that's about half as long as the whole strip. About 1/2 inch below that first cut, make a horizontal one about 1/3 the width of the paper. Then do the same on the other side. With those 3 cuts done, let's begin folding the whirlybird. Bring a propeller downward and fold it horizontally where the cut stops. Then flip it over and do the same thing for the other one so that they face opposite directions. Move the propellers out of the way and fold the sides over on each other as shown. To finish it, just put a large paperclip or a couple small ones on it. It weighs down the bottom so that the helicopter stays upright when you drop it. This paper aircraft is best used outdoors, and it becomes more and more awesome to watch as you drop it from larger heights. The last thing to make is a paper dart which flies in a straight arc and goes impressively far. It'll even stick into the grass on landing. Just like the airplane, the only thing we need to make this one is just a sheet of paper. Step 1 is to bring the top right corner over and down so that it lines up perfectly with the side of the page. Fold it down using the method I explained at the beginning of this video. Next, rotate it sideways and fold this narrow top part down so that the corners match up. Hold this part in place as you bring the top edge over to fold it in half. Make sure this crease is nice and flat. Then flip it toward you as shown, making sure that there's no extra slack as you wrap it around. Repeat this process until you run out of paper to wrap around the dart. You should be able to flip it 4 or 5 times in total. What we want to do next is tuck in the remaining paper flap into the pocket that was created. Flatten that out and it should look like this. The last step is to fold this shape in half. With thicker paper, you might need to coax it a bit with your fingernail to get it to bend right. Once you've managed to fold it in half, flatten it as much as possible. And just like that, the dart is done. If you'd like, you can color it without really affecting its flight. Not only will it look a lot cooler, but it also may help you find the dart after you throw it. These things are pretty fun to toss, but do not throw them at other people as a hit in the eye could cause some serious damage. An awesome thing about these projects, aside from the fact that they fly, is that you can upscale or downscale them pretty extensively and change the materials they're made out of. The general rule of thumb is to use thicker paper for larger crafts and thinner paper for smaller sizes. I made a couple giant paper airplanes using a thick poster board for each. You make the plane the same way as with normal paper, but with a lot more force and some extra patience. They actually flew pretty well at the park, although these things are definitely outdoor only airplanes due to how heavy they are and how much space they need to fly. Even the dart was able to be upscaled, although I had to use a thinner poster board than the colored ones I used for the planes. Even then, it was nearly impossible to complete the final fold, and some tools were needed to get it to bend. You pretty much need a hydraulic press to perfectly make this dart out of poster board. The giant whirlybird made out of poster board did pretty well for itself, and it was quite spectacular to see it fall to the ground. You'll need something larger than paper clips for this one though. Going in the opposite direction, I also scaled down the crafts, and they all worked really well. I used increasingly thin paper the smaller I made them. This 1/64th sized airplane, for example, I made out of thin tissue paper. It actually flies amazingly well, almost seeming like it floats. I somehow even got it to glide in a straight line. If you want to make a paper plane this small, you may need to use some tweezers to help you make the folds. The tiny dart actually seemed to fly better than its full-size counterpart, having a natural spin during flight. This one was made out of normal line paper and surprisingly still stuck into the grass despite its small size. This micro whirlybird was also made out of the same thin tissue paper as the airplane, and it flies really well too. For some reason, seeing it fly looked a little funny to me. Kinda reminds me of a tiny jellyfish, oddly enough. If you'd like, you can create the paper airplane out of thicker materials such as poster board without increasing the plane's size. This makes for a more durable plane. However, it also becomes pretty much an outdoor-only craft due to the high speed necessary for it to fly. The whirlybird can also be made thicker, but it seems to lose control after a little while. Unfortunately, creating the paper dart out of poster board without drastically increasing its size isn't really possible. It's just too thick and misproportioned to work without the help of a hydraulic press. Well, that wraps up this project video. I hope these paper aircrafts will bring you as much joy and provide as much fun as they've given me since I was young. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.